Welcome back, everybody, to another Rattlesnake TV debate, the third of its kind, I believe. Today we have got a debate between Apostate Prophet and Aiden Doyle. And the prompt of the debate today is Israel is not the bad guy. If you guys would like to find Aiden and Ridvan, their links will all be below. Just a few pre-show notes before we get into it. Don't forget to like this video, guys. It does help us, and it tells YouTube that this is something worth watching. It's going to be a pretty free-flowing debate. The topic is obviously the war in Gaza, so it's a controversial topic. Prompt being Israel is not the bad guy. Each guy will get their chance to make an opening statement, and then we will get into some dialogue. So whoever opens the statements, the other person will be able to open the back and forth. Ridvan, or Apostate Prophet today, will be opening because he is making the positive claim. And then at the end, if we want to tie up some loose ends, we can have a little bit of a free-flowing back and forth as well. As the moderator, I will only intervene if you guys are talking over each other too much, and also when we need to move the topic along or if we need clarification on something. In terms of super chats, we will be putting them on the screen as they come, unless the super chats are unbecoming of this civilized debate. And $20 and above will be read out at the end, and Ridvan and Aiden will have the chance to respond for about 20 minutes to half an hour or so. Finally, you'll see in the chat that there is a poll up at the moment with the prompt, Israel is not the bad guy. Make sure, if you are watching, to go and get your votes in now. And then at the end, we will run the exact same poll. The poll is Israel is not the bad guy, agree, disagree, and then undecided. And we will see who is most successful in changing people's minds. That is the idea of the debate, is for these two men to bring forth the most convincing case possible for their side, and hopefully the poll results will reflect that. So, without further ado, guys, we are going to bring up our debaters. Okay, gentlemen, starting with you, Aiden, just a little bit of an introduction about yourself and who you are and where they can find you.
Sure. So my name's Aiden Doyle. I'm a student at UCLA. You guys can find me at Aiden Doyle with 3 E's on Twitter, and the same handle on Instagram if you guys want to, check me out. I'm excited to do this debate. Thanks, Jake, for having me.
No problems. And Ridvan?
Yeah, I'm Ridvan Aydemir, known as Apostate Prophet, YouTuber, researcher, former Muslim, critic of Islam, defender of Israel, and so on. We'll be happy to do this. Thank you so much, Jake, for organizing it, and thanks to Aiden for agreeing to this. This will be good.
Fantastic. Well, with that, Ridvan, if you don't mind getting into your first opening statements, I'm going to put 5 minutes on the clock, and let's get into it.
Just a second. I forgot, as usual, to set my own timer just so I know where I am.
Good idea.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
All right.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen for a few things here to make it easier. But so today I'm going to defend a position that Israel is not the bad guy, which to me is not a very difficult thing to assert. I come from a Muslim background. I am an ex-Muslim. I grew up in a very religious Muslim family. So one thing that I need to point out from the very, very beginning is the fact that as a religious Muslim, in a religious Muslim household, I grew up as a child very early on with the idea that in the future, possibly in the near future, we Muslims would fight and kill the Jews and eradicate them. This goes back to a very famous, very popular prophecy in Islam by Prophet Muhammad, which comes up whenever there is a conflict, whenever the conflict reignites. It goes, the messenger of Allah said, the last hour would not come unless the Muslims will fight against the Jews, and the Muslims would kill them until the Jews would hide themselves behind a stone or a tree. And a stone or a tree would say, Muslim or servant of Allah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. But the tree Gargat would not say, for it is the tree of the Jews. This is not just something that my parents and my community came up with. It's something that Muhammad said, apparently, and that Muslims around the world follow and remind each other of whenever this conflict gets very serious. This is also part of the Hamas charter. Yes, Hamas had a charter published in 1988 in which in Article 7, you can find word for word this promise laid out, where Hamas says that no matter how long they have to struggle for it and no longer how long they have to wait, the day will come when they will fulfill the realization of Allah's promise, and then they read it out. The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews, and so on. So this is directly in the charter, the constitution, the primary foundational text of the Hamas terrorist organization that Israel is at war with. Now, there are lots of claims that people make about Israel's role in all of this conflict. There are a few things that I want to address from the very beginning, which is that a lot of people seem to be very unaware of the real history of this entire conflict. People often present this idea that there was once a land called Palestine, or a country called Palestine, and a Palestinian nation. And this Palestinian nation had control over its borders. And the Jews just came along one day, Israel just came along one day and started stealing this land and kicking those people out. None of this really happened. This is completely academically disproven, discredited, nonsensical. In reality, people in this land were subjects of the Ottoman Empire in the early 1900s. When the First World War broke out, the British took this area over and called it Mandatory Palestine, which goes back to the Romans naming it Palestine based on the Greek naming Philistia, in order to spite and suppress the Jewish identity. Prior to that, they used to call it the province of Judea. Under Britain and under the League of Nations, it was determined that in this land, a homeland for the Jews, because of their historical connection, should be re-established. The Zionists, the Zionists or the Jews, Israel, from the beginning, were very, very willing to make peace, to coexist, to establish their own state with or without the other population, the Arabs, who were at that time only called Arabs, in this land. The other side never accepted it. The other side has always had the goal of eradicating the Jews, of killing the Zionists, of getting rid of any attempt of sovereignty for the Jews, and so on. In fact, the only recognized legitimate leader of the Arabs at the time, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, was a friend of Mussolini and also a friend of Hitler, who gave him the promise that once they are done with the Soviets and the British, he would come down and help them eradicate the Jews and give the Arabs authority over all of this land. Fast forward until this day, the fighting between the Arab side and the Jewish side kept going on. Around the 60s, the Arab side started adopting this idea of we are Palestinians and we have a Palestinian state. In the 80s, the first attempt of creating a Palestinian state was actually done. And only under Israeli control or occupation, or whatever you want to call it, did we ever see the emergence of autonomous Palestinian Arab territories. So, if anything, it is Israel. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. If anything, it is Israel that gave these people who later identified as Palestinians the ability to self-govern. In 2005, Israel did something very remarkable. Until 2005, the
10
Israel
seconds, Ridvan.
had Jewish population in Gaza, which they got out of and left it to the Gazans, who elected Hamas, who have done nothing but fight since then.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ridvan. And guys, just wanted to remind everybody that we have got a poll up in the chat. We had to actually redo the poll at the start. So if you think you've voted already, then make sure you go and you're sure of that by going and putting your vote in right now, because we want to make sure that we get as good an understanding of the audience's position as possible. So without further ado, Aiden, if you want to go for your opening statement, then let's get into it.
Sure thing. So as of right now, Israel is in the midst of committing a 15-month genocide against the Palestinian people. The number given by the Gaza Health Ministry is currently at 45,000, but there's good reason to believe that it is significantly higher, not only because the infrastructure of Gaza has been largely destroyed, dismantling many of the mechanisms that could be used to actually count the death toll, but also because as early as May, the UN said that as many as 10,000 people could still be buried under the rubble. During the genocide, Israel has committed countless war crimes. They have displayed incredible negligence, so much negligence that it could really only reasonably said that this was purposeful negligence designed to cause as much destruction and chaos and turmoil as possible in Gaza. They have used horrifying and illegal tactics, including starvation, targeting of civilians, aid workers, and journalists, including 217 journalists and media workers. For comparison, in the sum total of 57 years of the Libya, Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan wars, 519 journalists died. The Gaza genocide, for comparison, has been going on for only 15 months. This conflict, of course, did not start on October 7th. Much of this debate may center around what has happened since then, and I will try and prove to Ridvan and Jake's audience that what has happened since October 7th is not justified by anything. Genocide is never justified by anything, but of course, this conflict has gone on since many years before October 7th. For 75 years, Israel has in various ways oppressed, ethnically cleansed, and recently genocided the Palestinian population. After 1948, the non-Jewish population was subject to military rule, arbitrary detentions, curfews, etc. After 1967, when Israel conquered the West Bank and Gaza, we saw the beginning of the apartheid system that we see today. Although there weren't widespread checkpoints, there was no right to vote, and there were numerous other human rights violations. Israel has justified their current apartheid in a few ways. They say that the Jews are unsafe around the world and their own state is the only way that they can ensure their own safety, which is, I mean, I don't even think I need to point out the irony of that, because as many Zionists will tell you, untruly or truly, rightly or wrongly, October 7th was the greatest attack against Jews since the Holocaust. Now, I personally believe that this is a mischaracterization of October 7th, but if we take Zionists at their words, then it leads to an obvious contradiction. Zionists will claim that they have historic right to the land, so it is theirs to do as they please, including oppress other populations, including indigenous populations. Well, I would challenge Ridvan to explain exactly how they have this right, Jewish people specifically, as opposed to any other group of people, and why it has any force, especially Ridvan, as I believe he is an atheist, why he would believe that any religious people have any right to any land because of their religion. Zionists may say that it is for their own security that they have to institute apartheid. Now, firstly, I can say that this is strangely reminiscent of Jim Crow or apartheid South Africa, where it was claimed that whites needed to have these laws in order for their own protection or for their own security or for their own culture. And we can see now that that is extremely racist, and is racist in the case of Israel as well. According to Israeli analysts Ephraim Inbar and Eitan Shamir, Israel's strategy over the past 20 years is population-centric. It does not aim to end the conflict or to keep peace, but to use asymmetrical and short-term warfare in order to essentially temper militant groups for long periods of time. In the Clean Break memo, Richard Pearl suggests that Israel should maintain that they have the right to hot pursuit anywhere within the Palestinian territory, as well as promoting alternatives to the current Palestinian leadership, which was Yasser Arafat at the time. Now, this shows that Israeli strategy is not only asymmetrical and targets civilians. Israeli strategy is designed not to keep peace, but to simply cause destruction repeatedly in order to mow the lawn, essentially. Now, it is clear that after October 7th, Israel's vitriol for the Palestinian people increased exponentially. Anthony Blinken even said in a recent interview that he had to convince, with an enormous amount of backlash, the Israeli government to let aid into Gaza. My argument throughout this debate will be that Israel is committing a genocide, that Israel is an apartheid state, and it is impossible to have a state of Israel that is not discriminatory and is not antithetical to American and to liberal values.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you both for your opening statements. In terms of the poll results, the prompt of the debate is Israel is not the bad guy, and the audience has agreed 64% that Israel is not the bad guy, disagree 17%, so 17% siding with Aiden, and then undecided 18%. So it's going to be an interesting one to see who is able to convince more people. And with that, Aiden, I will give you the floor to cross-examine Ridvan's point of view first of all.
Sure. So Ridvan has made the claim that Islam is central to this conflict. Now, although religion is clearly important to this conflict, including Judaism, Jewish values, Islam, Islamic resistance, the resistance in Palestine was secular before Hamas. Ridvan conveniently leaves that out. That Israel actually, and you can actually look this up, that it was General Yitzhak Segev who was given the authority to fund Hamas as a counterweight to the secular Palestinian Liberation Organization. Now, they believed that this would deter Western support and that it would divide the Palestinian people among themselves. And you can see this clearly leading up to October 7th, where Netanyahu increased the funding for Hamas, even though they had reports as early as May of 2023 that Hamas was planning an attack. Now, obviously, Ridvan should know this, and I've seen his debate with Daniel Hakikachu, where he cites the 1988 charter. The 1988 charter, and uses the fact that they quote from the Quran certain anti-Semitic statements. Well, Ridvan, you should know that Hamas has changed their charter. And in the same way that any institution or any organization...
Are you going to ask a question, or where's this going?
Yeah, so guys, just quickly, in terms of the cross-examination, Aiden, you want to be keeping it as short and sharp as possible and actually asking Ridvan some questions and examining his point of view and doing a bit of an internal sort of critique of his worldview. So,
Sure. Ridvan, what do you think about Israel funding Hamas in the 70s and 80s? Funding.
So it's actually very simple. When you say that the Palestinian struggle against Israel was a secular one, it's not entirely true. Hamas's criticism of the so-called resistance was that it had become very un-Islamic, and it was indeed led by certain secular organizations. However, the society itself was never entirely secular and had forever, including especially before 1948, maintained the prophecies of the humiliation and destruction of the Jewish entity. Of course, Hamas brought an end to the vastly secular dominance by the PFLP and others, for example, and took over with Islamization, which was also very popular. But Israel funded this because, I would say, Israel's ignorance. Israel is not perfect. Israel thought, okay, these guys are going the hard way. Let's fund this Muslim organization that wants to supposedly bring peace, because Hamas made itself known as a peaceful humanitarian organization until the mid 80s or late 80s, and then they started attacking and fighting. After which point Israel immediately stopped and started fighting with them. It's not like Israel was aware that these guys are violent jihadists.
Okay, so to make it clear, the PLO charter in 1964 explicitly states that they are secular, that they are nationalist, that they are not an Islamic organization, that they welcome Christians, Muslims, people of all religions, and anybody who will contribute to the nationalist cause of the Palestinian people. But you still cannot answer. I don't think that you can answer the question: why is it that Netanyahu increased funding to Hamas before October 7th? And to make the point even further, why did they ignore reports from as early as May of 2023 that there was going to be an attack? And I can even press you even more and say that there were, according to the Wall Street Journal, there were Israeli security teams that had seen not only military parades in Gaza on October 4th of 2023, they also saw in the morning, before the October 7th attack, they saw vans moving around, they saw increased activity. And not only that, but Egypt also told Israel that there was going to be an attack. It seems like Netanyahu, consistent with their strategy over the past 20 years of using this kind of short-term asymmetrical warfare, which then changed after October 7th to being long-term and much more destructive, seemed like their strategy of kind of trying to just destroy the spirit of the Palestinian people continued. And that this maybe not have been premeditated, but
we'll try not to shotgun the points too much, guys. So we'll try to go one point at a time. I think that the first point was that they increased the funding for Hamas before October 7th.
So here's the thing, Aiden. I'm not sure how your education really paid off for this, but you don't seem to really understand Muslim society. If a Muslim society in its leadership identifies as secular and says we are open to anyone and so on, the secular is not the society is not necessarily secular. You probably haven't been into any Muslim country, but for example, Turkey will be presented as a secular country that is totally open to anyone and so on. Nevertheless, the society is full of Islamic and Islamist aspects, insofar that I, as an ex-Muslim and critic of Islam, cannot go there or I will be arrested. However,
Okay.
when it comes to Netanyahu's funding of Hamas, you seem to also making up a false narrative and misrepresenting what actually happened. Netanyahu did not increase funding of Hamas. Netanyahu wasn't funding Hamas. Israel wasn't funding Hamas before October 7. What Netanyahu did do is, for which he received criticism, he allowed Qatari funds to go to Gaza for humanitarian aid and so on, which is very ironic because on the other hand, you guys will complain that Gaza was being oppressed. Allowed fundings to go there under the impression or with the strategy that this will pacify Hamas and possibly reduce terrorist attacks, which was a failure, which many people within his own government said and also still say. Now, when it comes to signs of October 7 appearing, you could say that Israel made great mistakes in underestimating what was going on. You have internal fights, internal rivalries, people cracking down on Netanyahu, looking for an opening, looking for something. I went to Israel. I talked to politicians. Everybody was asking the same questions. It's not like the entire government of Israel is this unified bad guy, Satan devil that just does everything as they wish. They received mixed signals. Certain intelligence aspects of the Israeli government were very harsh and said something is coming, we have to do something. Other aspects ignored it, and within this big strife, October 7 happened. It's not like this has to be deliberate, because if you are going to make the assertion that they ignored it in order to destroy Hamas or in order to destroy the Gazans, you are just making up a conspiracy theory without basing it on any evidence at all.
Well, it's actually not a conspiracy theory. It's based on the strategy that Israel has employed over the past 20 years, which is to engage in hot pursuit whenever they feel like it's necessary, to enjoy relatively long year, 2-3 year long periods of peace in exchange for short-term war. Now, I'm not going to make the argument.
So you mean they left Gaza and gave them autonomy to build them up in order to then just wait for a fight? How do you think that's reasonable?
Well, they did not give Gaza autonomy by any metric of international law.
They literally
Okay,
did.
is it possible? Is it possible, Ridvan, for Gazan businesses to export goods to Europe?
Very much depends on the regulations in place due
answer-
to Hamas's great history of terrorism. Yeah.
Okay, the answer is no, because Israel has an embargo. Does Hamas have any control over
Why do they
the
have an
airspace
embargo?
above them?
No,
Does
but
Hamas
why?
have any control over the airspace above them? Well,
Not entirely.
the
For
assertion-
very
we're not debating why they have
for very simple reasons, which is that, as I said, Israel had control over Gaza from the 60s to 2005. By the way, very funny. Before that, it was actually under Egyptian occupation and didn't have freedom at all. When Israel took it over, when Israel left in 2005, they put a blockade in place and said they will be gradually lifting it depending on how Gaza fares. What Gaza did in 2006 and 2007 is to elect Hamas, put them in power, and Hamas then made it very clear that they have no intention to ever recognize, to ever negotiate, to ever make peace, and to ever stop fighting, including terrorism, Israel, upon which Israel said, all right, then we will not lift any blockade at all. Good.
Okay, so in 2006,
Yeah.
When Hamas was elected,
Yeah.
and there was a ceasefire, as I'm sure you know, there's a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. And the agreements of the deal of the ceasefire was that Israel would lift the embargo and Hamas would not fire any rockets into Israel. Do you know who broke the ceasefire agreement first?
Tell me who broke it first.
Well, it was Israel. because Israel did not actually in practice carry out the terms of the agreement. They didn't end the embargo, which were literally the terms of the ceasefire. So when you blame Hamas,
that's actually completely wrong, because from the disengagement in 2005 onward, Israel had made it an official policy, very clear, also with the intervention of the United Kingdom and the USA and other forces, that this disengagement and the autonomy of Gaza will only continue as promised if a force is elected that will recognize Israel and will agree to mutual negotiations and agreements. Hamas, as soon as they were elected, with their history of wanting to kill the Jews entirely, said from the very beginning, we reverse and nullify hereby all peace processes and agreements. We will never recognize Israel. We will fight and kill them. If a terrorist organization comes to the top and says we will fight, and we will fight until we have cleansed this land of the cancer of the Jews, why in the world would you expect Israel to just be like, yeah, okay, whatever, maybe they'll be fine?
Well, wait, Ridvan, because this is actually a shifting of the goalpost. Because I made the claim that Israel continues to occupy Gaza because they have control of the airspace, they have control over the sea by Gaza. There's an embargo. They have no real capabilities to trade, and as of right now, there's no going in or out of Gaza.
Yeah.
And
Rightly
really,
so.
before there's hardly any ability to go in and out of Gaza. Something like 1% of the population was allowed a work permit. And you responded by saying, well, Hamas is evil. Well, that's not really the point that I was debating. We can debate that if you want, but the point is
who's in
that
charge? Who's in charge of Gaza?
Well, just let me finish really quickly. Whether Hamas is evil or not, Israel continues to occupy Gaza.
Yeah, of course they should. Of course they should. If you have a neighbor
so you admit,
who promises to you that they will eradicate you and kill you, would you just be fine with that? No. Of course, Israel has to put an embargo. If that's what you call an occupation, they're not literally occupying. They are putting an embargo around Gaza and keeping it under control, because of the very, very fact that Hamas has said from the beginning that they will never have mutual recognition with Israel. I am sorry, I brought up from the very beginning, Hamas is a terrorist organization that has proudly and loudly engaged in suicide attacks, that bragged about suicide attacks, that bragged about eradicating the Jews, that bragged about fighting and no recognition. If this organization is in charge of Gaza, no reasonable party would ever be the target of this brutal hate and violence and then say, oh yeah, totally, we will just give these guys autonomy. It's good that Israel has put a strict tie around them. In fact, Israel was too merciful. In my opinion, Israel should have gone in immediately after 2006 or 2007 and dismantled all of it. Shouldn't even have waited until now. What in the world is this idiotic expectation that Israel somehow has to accept these guys who say we want to eradicate the Jews and has to give them autonomy? They don't deserve autonomy. They don't want peace. If you want autonomy, if you want rights, if you want land, you need to recognize the rights of the other side. Otherwise, don't cry if you are going to end up losing.
Okay. All right, let's take that and let's run with it. Okay. I mean, I disagree with most of what you said, but I'll just give you that.
Jake, when are we turning this around?
Sorry.
So just until we've got about like 60 to 90 minutes of open discussion. So I was thinking maybe 20, 30 minutes. Aiden can cross-examine your worldview. So he'll have about another 15, 20 minutes or so, and then you can do the same. And when you are internally critiquing the other person's worldview, you do have the floor, so you are able to interrupt as much as you like and basically just.
Sorry, Jake. Jake, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize it was going to be. Sorry, I didn't realize it was going to be 30 minutes of me having the floor.
We didn't have it specified. Yeah.
So yeah, you're doing an internal critique at the moment. We've got about another 20 minutes or so of this, and then Ridvan will be able to do the same.
Okay,
roughly.
Great.
If we don't need that much time, we can always switch it over.
Sorry, I didn't even realize that was going to be the structure of this. But perfect. That's great. I lost my train of thought. What were we just talking about?
Good question. We're talking about how Hamas wants to eradicate the Jews.
it is, of course, ironic.
I think
that,
Ridvan was saying that they should have done it sooner. They should have come in and
right.
and
Right. Oh, yeah,
yeah.
right. Thank you. So it is, of course, ironic that Ridvan will talk about Israel, or I'm assuming I haven't heard him say it about Israel at this debate, but Zionist will talk about Israel as if it's democratic, it's free, it treats all people equally. And then Ridvan will say that Israel should not allow Palestinians in Gaza to have autonomy or sovereignty, and that because of who they elected, they shouldn't have any rights at all. And Israel will say, Israel said in 2005, and they were pressured into doing this, will let Palestine have a free and fair election. Well, in reality, it wasn't free and fair at all, right? Ridvan, the question I want to ask you then is, if Israel, how is Israel a free and fair democracy if it doesn't let Palestinian people have autonomy? And two, what about the West Bank? The Palestinian Authority recognizes Israel's right to exist. Why don't they stop occupying the West Bank?
Very nice questions. Number one, you are doing something that people who don't know much about the conflict and the region often do. You are conflating two entirely different things. You also talked lengthily about apartheid, and this really brings into question your education, which you seem to get from really ridiculous institutions in the West. You seem to imply that in Israel, because of these different treatments of the so-called Palestinian population and their autonomy, Israel is very clearly engaging in apartheid and discrimination and so on. So how can they claim to be a free and democratic country? Well, you are conflating two entirely different things. Inside Israel, every person is entirely equal. There is no discrimination. There is no discrimination at all. There is no difference in rights, nothing at all. Israel has a 20% Arab population that is thriving, that is working in the police force, in politics, in medicine, in science, and wherever it is. They have the same rights. There is not a single right that is missing in terms of civil rights. Outside of these borders, you will say that one could argue that Israel gives a certain amount of autonomy, which is why Israel also recognized, for example, the Palestinian Authority as official representative of the Arab Palestinian people in the West Bank. This was also meant to happen to Gaza until Gaza, of course, elected Hamas, and Hamas then started infighting and killing and kicked out the Palestinian Authority and took out and took sole control over Gaza. Now you have two representatives of the so-called Palestinians. You have the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank that was against Hamas the entire time, and then you have Hamas that is against the Palestinian Authority and considers them as traitors. How in the world do you think Israel should be recognizing these sides, and how do you think that Israel should treat these guys under these autonomous regions just the way it treats its own citizens as equals? Of course, Israel cannot do that. These people live under autonomous groups for a reason, under a recognized Palestinian Authority and under a self-elected Hamas terrorist Islamist organization that is all out until this day on the mass killing and eventual genocide of Jews. There is complete freedom and democracy inside Israel. That does not have to apply to those regions that are autonomous or, by your false standard, occupied.
Okay, so let me push back on you a little bit there. When you say that all people in Israel are, well, I wish I could ask you two questions at once. First of all, you said that because Hamas doesn't even recognize the right of Israel to exist, why should they not occupy them? Well, I just said the Palestinian Authority recognizes Israel's right to exist, and yet they still occupy the West Bank.
Yes.
Secondly, you say that there's equal rights in Israel. Well, why can non-Jews not buy 13% of the land in Israel? Or I should say at least 13%.
Because that has nothing to do with the legal rights. That is not about state rights. That is not about civil rights. That is not about laws. Because the lands are owned by certain organizations that want to establish certain standards based on which they distribute or buy or sell land. Now, your other question, which is about the Palestinian Authority or the West Bank, it's very funny. Israel made multiple attempts, very well known, together with Bill Clinton and others, to recognize the Palestinian Authority and to I mean, Israel made the clear promise to recognize them as an independent entity, to recognize a Palestinian state. The Palestinian Authority never accepted the conditions, never came to an agreement, which is why until this day it is not an independent state. If you are an entity that claims to be an independent state, you first have to make an agreement with those people that you are at conflict with in order to then finally actually become a de facto independent state. Otherwise, you cannot become independent and expect to be completely accepted by the other side, because you are still at a conflict.
Why would a sovereign people why would you ever expect a sovereign people to ever rely on another sovereign people, supposedly another sovereign people, for independence for themselves?
When did they become sovereign?
Right. Why would a group of people, a group of people, that's actually my point, is that they're not sovereign. So why would a group of people, let's say the Palestinians, why should they ever rely on another group of people's, go ahead to have their own sovereignty, their own state, their own autonomy?
Very simple. We already explained it earlier. In 1948, there was a partition plan in which Israel, so the Zionists and the Arabs, were given the option to establish their own independent states. At that point, the Zionists, now known as Israel, explicitly and clearly planned to create their own state named Israel, and also very clearly among themselves said the Arab side is expected to also create their own Arab independent state. At that point, they were able to or willing to recognize an independent Arab state as their neighbor. However, it didn't really go that way. As you may know, the Arab side, together with Arab nations surrounding Israel, instead of declaring their own sovereignty, declared war on Israel and invaded and started an extermination war with the aim of destroying this Israeli entity entirely. Since then, these two sides have been in a conflict, in a violent conflict, as a result of which Israel took control of much of the regions and wanted to make sure that there is security and proper agreements never to reignite the fighting ever again, and then to move forward. The Arab side, however, has never come to a proper agreement, has never even made a proper attempt to establish mutual relations, mutual respect, to come to an agreement for permanent peace and mutual recognition and sovereignty. Of course, these guys can't just do whatever they want. They were the aggressors, and they still are.
Okay, Jake, sorry, Apostate Prophet.
Yep.
You don't seem to know the history.
Jake, am I allowed to respond to this, or am I just supposed to be asking questions?
This is your time, man. So if you want to respond to it, you can. But you've got about 15 minutes or so maximum. So anything that is the burning that you really want to get off your chest, that you really want to critique Ridvan about, or internally critique his worldview about, then this is the time to do it.
Okay, well, I actually I haven't gotten to know Ridvan's worldview too much throughout this debate. He does say that I don't know the history of the conflict. That's fine for you to say, Ridvan, but as of right now, I'm just asking questions. I'm not actually trying to respond to anything you say or correct too much. Let's return to the point about rights in Israel, especially for non-Jewish people. You say that the Jewish National Fund, or the 13% of the land that is illegal, is not allowed to be leased to Palestinians, or excuse me, to non-Jews in Israel, is a private entity. Well, in the United States, we have something called civil rights laws, where you're not allowed to discriminate based on race or religion. Okay. Now, secondly, okay. Well, do you think that discrimination is a good thing?
Completely different issue, complete deflection from the topic. We have talked about whether Israel as a country has equal rights for everybody, or discriminates or not, and we have concluded that Israel does indeed have equal rights for everybody. If you want to nitpick and go about how Israel does not actively fight discrimination, then that is completely besides the point. Israel does not actively fight certain aspects of discrimination, maybe, but Israel has equal rights for everybody.
It's not that Israel does not. It's not that Israel just doesn't actively fight discrimination. It's that all of the land in Israel is owned by the Israeli government, and that land, 13% of that land, is not allowed to be leased to non-Jewish citizens. And so this you can obviously see is discriminatory from the state. It's not like it's not even some private, which, by the way, extremely problematic and discriminatory. Not something that we allow in the United States. That even if it was just a private organization that didn't sell land to non-Jews, that would still be a problem. But it's land that is owned by the Jewish state, which you seem to have missed.
So 13% of the land is owned by the entity that contributed to founding and establishing and solidifying the Jewish state, which is why you are arguing now that the two sides are not equal. So let's establish this for a second. You argued that Israel is not. Okay, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. You have argued that Israel.
I'm sorry. Ridvan, you can't get away with this. You're wrong. Who owns all of the land in Israel?
Go ahead, say what you want. Go ahead, say it. Go ahead.
Who owns all of the land in Israel?
Make your point. You don't have to ask me a question. Make your point.
Make
your point about what was wrong about what I just said.
The state of Israel owns all of the land in Israel. The state.
The state of Israel is not a state the way the USA is a state. The state of Israel.
I know it's an apartheid state.
Came together. Also, America is not. Okay, in America everything is all right. Wonderful, fantastic. I'm glad you agree on that. Israel is not a state the way the USA is a state. Israel is a state that became an entity that to this day doesn't have a proper constitution because they wanted to wait until things are properly established. That came together as a result of the Zionist movement and Zionist organizations, which established their presence in the land by buying the land. Most of the land, by buying the land, coming together and then forming this state. If now these organizations together have decided that for the good, for the betterment of their own, considering the history we have, they want to have a certain policy with this land, how in the world is this contradictory to the fact that everybody else, aside from the land issue, has equal rights inside Israel?
Just quickly, gentlemen, before we carry on, Aiden, you've got about 10 more minutes of your cross-examination. You can take it wherever you want. It's completely your time. But I would say that we haven't really gotten into the actual conflict yet. And you did say at the start that Israel was committing a genocide. I would encourage you to move into this a little bit, but it's your time completely.
Okay, yeah, we should move into that. Ridvan, all I'd say is that you say that the actual policy of the Israeli government, what they're allowed to do. I mean, we can list so many policies: admissions committee laws, the terrorism laws, which are purposely vague and discriminatory, the funding transparency law. I mean, all of these laws in Israel are discriminatory, and they are indicative of an apartheid state. Not only that, but also all the arbitrary detentions, the detentions for free speech. It's like if you want to call Israel a fascist apartheid state, I'd actually have a lot more respect for you because you'd actually be being honest. Now we can move on to the.
This is very interesting because you have conceded pretty much to the fact that within Israel, aside from the land issue, everyone is equal and there are no discriminatory rights. However, you are still going to argue that there is an apartheid at place and that Israel actively discriminates against people. Show me one law in Israel that discriminates between Jew and non-Jew.
Absolutely. The admissions committee law. 500 in townships of less than 500 homes, the township themselves can actually bar Arab citizens from buying or from leasing homes in those neighborhoods, in those communities. Now you can say, and I feel like you're about to say this, well, doesn't everybody have the ability to do that? Well, what communities are the wealthiest? What communities are the nicest? What communities are the largest? It's the Jewish communities. Now, and let's do another. This is not a law.
So,
but it is
so once
obviously
it,
just
so
a practice.
once again, you're making it look like Israel is brutally oppressing and taking away the rights of non-Jews, and the only thing that you can ever bring forth is that Arabs may be barred from holding certain land or from leasing certain land or this and that. That's it.
Yes,
So,
yes. I mean, you are
so there is
you
actually no oppression. There's
you are
actually
so
no
whipped. You're
discrimination of
so
rights.
no, you're so whipped and cucked to Israel that you can't just accept. Look, obviously, Israel privileges Jewish people over non-Jewish people. It is discriminatory, and it is an apartheid state. I mean, you can even just look in the West
By
Bank,
your
which Israel has
definition,
total control over.
by your definition, all Islamic countries are apartheid states. Will you accept that?
No, I'm not defending all Islamic countries like you say. We're focusing on Israel. Nice try to shift the goalpost. You just compared Israel to all Islamic countries, and as an
No,
ex-Muslim, anti-Muslim
no.
apostate, I would think that you would never consider Israel to be like an Islamic state.
That's a straw man. That's
You're
a
just
straw man
shifting the
argument.
goalpost. You're just
That's
shifting
a
the
straw man
goalpost.
argument because
We're talking about Israel.
you are saying that one aspect, which is not an active discrimination by rights, but rather a preference given to landowners, for example, would make Israel
Preference
an
to Jewish
apartheid state.
preference to Jewish
An
landowners. Ridvan.
apartheid
Preference to
state,
Jewish
if other
landowners.
states also have this law in place, along with many other discriminatory laws, apparently that wouldn't make them apartheid states to you. So you want to give us the picture that Israel is brutally discriminating against non-Jews, but the only thing you can ever give us is that Arabs may be barred from holding certain land.
I actually think that is perfectly representative of the state of Israel and the apartheid that Israel institutes in
Yeah,
its own
totally.
on its own land. I mean, this is just
Boo-hoo.
crazy. And then you're defending them not allowing non-Jews to buy land or to lease land. This is unbelievable. Now we can move on
Yeah,
to
brutal
the current
oppression right
conflict.
there.
Now, I mean, I don't even know where to start. Ridvan, you know that hospitals have been targeted. You know that refugee camps have been targeted. You know that children have been shot in the head. You know that that
Never
humans
happened.
are used, Palestinians
Never
are
never
used as
happened.
Palestinians are used as human shields. Okay.
Never happened.
Why do you justify? How do you justify? I mean, I don't even know how do you justify this brutal genocide where tens of thousands of innocent civilians have died.
Well, very simple. First off, if we look at certain studies, such as by people who actually know what they're talking about, like John Spencer, who is in America, who is an expert. Yeah, laugh about it.
John Spencer. There's
Are you
no
go- are
way
you
you
going to
just quoted
are you
John
going to
Spencer.
are you going to listen to my
Sure,
response,
go
or are you
ahead.
going
Go
to
ahead.
goof
Go
off
ahead.
here?
John
So
Spencer.
you with your woke UCLA perspective are going to, of course, make the argument that killing people is genocide, tripping over is genocide. Somebody who is actually an expert in urban warfare and who works in advising the military, the greatest militaries in the world, is actually somebody who is a scholar in this field and puts together all the data we have of urban warfare in history and concludes that in the history of urban warfare, Israel is not only doing their best to abide by all the standards that they are expected to abide by, is also overdoing them in order to prevent civilian casualties. And this is very, very much consistent. Just look at the civilian to non-civilian casualties in this current war. You will get to at most a number of 2 civilians per one combatant, or 2 civilians per one terrorist, or something like that. This is a completely normal number in the history of urban warfare in war. There's nothing exceptional to this at all. Gaza is an extremely densely populated area where Hamas does not have military facilities, does not have designated military areas, where Hamas actively uses hospitals, schools, homes, and so on. You can deny this all you want. Even the organizations that you will appeal to, such as Amnesty International, have repeatedly told Hamas not to do this, and that they are doing this, including that they're using 12-year-old children to carry bombs, for example. Under such circumstances, it is entirely normal that Israel will fight a war against such a disgusting enemy, and that civilian casualties will occur as a result. There has never been a pattern of shooting kids in the head or anything like that. That is just completely made up.
Okay, well, the New York Times would actually disagree with you. In fact, in
Yeah, the
an
New York
expose they made a few months ago, 65 doctors said that they saw children with gunshot wounds. Okay, now you can just say that this was Hamas, or that it was somebody else, or that the IDF just didn't see them. Well, the IDF soldiers would disagree with you as well. In fact, IDF soldiers have acknowledged in New York Times articles and other articles as well that they have been using Palestinians as human shields. In fact, in a New York Times article where 16 IDF officers were interviewed, they said that they used a Palestinian hostage to inspect buildings and to scout out areas to make sure that there were no mines and bombs. It seems like Israel uses human shields. It seems like Israel is the one that is killing children. It seems like Israel is the one that's targeting hospitals, targeting residential buildings. In fact, you certainly have no excuse for Israel killing 106 people back in November of 2023, where 106 civilians were killed and no military base, or Tel al-Sultan, al-Shabura, or
what military base?
All these places. No military base in Karam al-Sharif.
What military base?
None of these places had military bases, and in many of them, no leaflets were dropped.
Does Gaza have military bases, Aiden? How many military bases are there in Gaza?
There's no Hamas. Excuse me. There's no Hamas presence. There's no
okay,
Hamas
but
presence whatsoever.
You're mentioning something very ridiculous. Military bases. How many military bases are there in Gaza?
Well, how
many designated military zones are there in Gaza?
According to Israel, every single hospital is a military base or is a military zone.
Exactly. Here is the issue. You are so blind that you don't even see the irony here. On the one hand, you imply to deny that Hamas actively uses civilian facilities for military operations. On the other hand, you basically point out here that there are no military facilities inside Gaza, despite the fact that Hamas is fighting from within Gaza. So there are no military facilities, no military bases. Where exactly are they fighting from, Hayden?
As I said, I wasn't talking about where they're fighting from. I was
where are they fighting from?
Excuse
1
me,
minute, fellas. 1 minute, and then we'll move on.
I was talking about the places like Karam al-Sharif or Tel al-Zatar or al-Shabura, where there was no Hamas presence, where Israel wantonly bombed them.
It's never Hamas. Never Hamas. Nobody is Hamas.
Okay, fellas. Why
would Israel bomb Karam al-Sharif?
Nobody is Hamas.
Why would Israel bomb a place where there's no Hamas presence?
Nobody is Hamas. That's why.
All right, fellas. Okay. Let's move this on now. That's been
that Israel purposely bombed civilians.
Okay, so that was half an hour. Aiden, I really appreciate the questions, and Ridvan, I appreciate the succinct responses. Really good faith debate so far, I'd say, guys, and that's much appreciated. Ridvan, you've got half an hour on the clock now. I am hoping that we can get to the conflict at some point, but it's your half an hour, so you take it where you will.
All right. Well, first off, I want to ask the one question, which is, Aiden, do you acknowledge that that Hamas, the organization in charge right now, is not a legitimate organization that actually aims toward a peace process, but that is, however, an organization that has maintained from the very beginning until this day that their aim is to destroy Israel and to also eradicate the Jews?
No, I don't acknowledge that their aim is to eradicate the Jews. I mean, the only way that that we can reasonably assess what their aim is to look at their charter. Now, I acknowledge that Hamas had a very problematic charter, obviously, in 1988.
Problematic.
Yeah. Do you disagree?
So problematic is a big understatement. You know that they promised that their goal was to,
meaning,
you agree that their goal was to eradicate the Jews, right?
Problematic meaning that they had issues with their charter. Now,
do you agree that they fundamentally wanted to eradicate the Jews?
No, I don't.
So their charter says that they want to eradicate the Jews, but you don't want to acknowledge that.
Their charter says eradicate the Jews.
Yeah. In 1988, their charter said that they will work toward no matter how long it takes, toward Allah's promise, which is that they will fight the Jews and they will kill them until they hide behind rocks and trees, and even rocks and trees will say there is a Jew behind
Okay. Just
me.
wanted
Come
to
and
make
kill
sure.
him.
Just
Come and
wanted to
kill
make
him.
sure. Just wanted to make sure it didn't say eradicate the Jews. It said go to war with the Jews, which again I don't. I mean,
It didn't say go to war with Jews.
That does not. What did it? Yes, it did. That's
it
what
was
it says.
based on the prophecy.
But anyways, I've actually, I don't know why we're focusing on this, because I actually said, I disavow the original Hamas charter. I don't subscribe. I don't believe in it. So they have actually revised their charter, and like any organization, they have the ability to adapt and grow and change. And as you probably are well aware of, Hamas has at multiple points showed willingness to accept a two-state solution.
No, they haven't.
Yeah, they have. In 2007.
Where?
In 2007,
Where?
they said, 2007. Look it up. 2000. Do you want me to pull it up right now? 2007.
Yeah. What did they say?
Shows willingness to.
So in 2007, while following the charter, in which they say they will never ever accept a two-state solution, and their aim is to eventually destroy the Zionists and eradicate the Jews, they also at the same time said that they are willing to establish a two-state solution. Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah, you can, dude, look it up. I mean, look, even right here, AP News, Hamas again raises the possibility of a two-state compromise.
All right. According to you, in their currently updated charter of 2017, do they promise to work toward a two-state solution?
No, and actually, I don't believe in a two-state solution, so I don't think they should. But they've acknowledged.
Okay, so they don't. So they don't.
Which is what you said, and that they just want to destroy Israel. Well, no, clearly by their willingness to accept a two-state solution in the past, they don't just have the goal of destroying Israel. And actually, there's this always this.
Do you know what the charter says about?
That's used. Would you let me finish this? I'll finish really quickly for you. There's always this rhetoric: destroy Israel, destroy Israel, destroy Israel. I personally don't think that a state that privileges Jewish people over other people should exist. I think that people should live with equal rights, with everyone with the right to vote, with the right to movement. And Israel currently does not allow that. So in a way, I mean, I don't think that we should destroy Israel or kill tons of Israeli people. I think that's wrong, and I think that goes against personally my values. But I don't think that Israel should exist in its current form. I think that's
what do you think? What do you think would happen to Jewish people if Israel was destroyed by Hamas, for example?
What do you think would happen?
I'm asking you.
If Israel's destroyed by Hamas,
yeah.
Well, if you're going to, I could easily make the question: what do you think would happen to Americans if America was destroyed? I mean, it would.
Okay, I'm asking you a very simple question.
It's a hypothetical where the answer is based on the question. I mean, it would be Israel would be destroyed. I don't know what you want me to say.
What would be happening to the Jewish people? I didn't say what would happen to Israel if Israel was destroyed. I said what would happen to the Jewish people if Israel was destroyed by Hamas.
I can't imagine it would be as bad as what is happening to the Palestinian people right now in Gaza.
So you will just not answer the question. What will happen to Jews if Israel is destroyed by Hamas?
I just find it. Well, you characterize it as Jews. When
just answer the question.
They're Israeli citizens. Well, if I mean, it's so unbelievable that you are saying that the Jewish people need to be protected, and I agree. Of course, all people should be protected, but then you don't acknowledge that what you worry about happening to Israel is exactly what is happening to Gaza right now.
It's actually not. But I will ask you one final time: what do you think will happen to the Jewish people if Israel is destroyed by Hamas?
I have no idea. I mean, what
I will tell you.
I assume that it would be a lot of bloodshed and warfare, but it's kind of a hypothetical that doesn't exist in this.
I will tell you. I will ask you another question to tell you exactly what
it doesn't even make sense to me that you would ask this question when there's no possibility of Hamas destroying Israel, and right now Israel is destroying Gaza.
Good.
This is what's so ridiculous.
Good.
This is what's so.
Good that there is no possibility of Hamas destroying Israel.
That they're destroying. No.
Good that there is no possibility of destroying Israel.
Good that they're destroying God. Okay, so this is
I never said that.
The whole epitome. This is the epitome of the debate, Ridvan, is that I I, on the pro-Palestinian side, want equal rights and equal treatment for all people. You want to destroy Gaza. That is
I never said
genocidal
that.
statement. That
I
is a
never said
genocidal
that.
statement, Ridvan. You did.
I never
You
said that.
play the tape back. Play the tape back. I said Israel is destroying Gaza right now, and you said good, and then you repeated
No.
good, and then you repeated good
No.
again.
No.
Play the tape back.
I clarified very simply. You said Hamas cannot destroy Israel, and I said good. You spoke after that, and you're now trying to make it look like I said the destruction of Gaza is good. That's not what I said. I said it's good that Hamas doesn't have the ability to destroy Israel. You refuse to answer the question. You are pushed into a corner. Now you're trying to put words into my mouth.
Hamas doesn't.
So
Hamas doesn't have.
Here's the thing, Aidan. Here's the thing.
Hamas doesn't have the ability to destroy Israel. Hamas doesn't have the ability to destroy Israel.
Just quickly, fellas, I just want to really quickly
good.
interrupt here. In terms of the questions, even if they are hypotheticals, even if the hypotheticals do seem absurd, they are designed to test the logic of the worldview. So we can carry on with those hypotheticals if we want.
So here's the thing.
Jake, I have to disagree with that. Can I respond to that? Because I actually have to disagree with that. If Hamas had the power to destroy Israel, everything would be so different that it doesn't even bear answering, because the entire conflict would be completely different. So I can't even answer that question. If it's almost like asking, if everything in the world was different, if the laws of physics were different, what would you do in this situation? It's impossible to answer, because
it is actually within the laws of physics, though, Aidan, it is actually possible that Hamas could logically destroy Israel. That is actually possible.
Okay.
That is a possibility. So but it's not that absurd a hypothetical for him to ask.
Just take this into consideration. If you are going to talk about the possibility of Hamas destroying Israel, let's turn it around, for example, and let's ask, what do you think would happen to Arabs if Israel was able to have full control over the land?
Over, what do you mean over the land? Over all of Arabia?
Over all of the land of Israel.
You mean Greater Israel?
All of the land of Israel.
Land of Israel, right? Like Greater Israel?
Everything that they currently have that is officially recognized, everything that encompasses direct Israeli control at this moment.
We can see what Israel's doing when they control the
tell me what would happen to Arabs if they control all the land?
When they control Gaza, they genocide Palestinians. When they control the West Bank, they use an apartheid system. They use checkpoints you can't get from place to place. And what's funny about this is that you say what would happen if
what Israel is happening to the Arabs inside Israel?
We have gone over this, Ridvan. They're not able to own certain tracts of land in Israel. They're not able to buy houses in Israel. They're arbitrarily detained. In fact, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but in Israel, detainees are detained for up to a year without trial, and they can be arrested for things they say on the internet. I mean, this is, and you could be dishonest and say that well, of course, like this applies to everyone. This applies to Israelis too. Well, you would have to be a dumbass to not realize that this is specifically targeted to Arab Israelis.
I will give you the answer. The Arab population inside Israel has twice the population growth than the Jewish population inside Israel. So when Israel has actual direct control over land where Arabs live, Arabs are thriving in the land. The Arab population has been increasing inside Israel, and the Arab population is has also had a steady increase in quality of life inside Israel. In fact, according to quality of life data, Arabs inside Israel have much higher quality of life than all of the surrounding Arab countries.
Okay, again, another whataboutism. You don't actually address the points that I made, which is that,
whataboutism at all.
As I've said over and over again, that Arabs can't even own certain land in Israel. Instead, you say, well, no, Arabs have a high birth rate. Well, hey, dummy.
So they are not destroying Arabs.
I don't care. I don't care about their birth rate. I care about.
So they are not genociding Arabs
in Israel. I care about the fact that in 2015, 400.
So they are not genociding Arabs.
We're detained. We're detained for things they said on the internet. I mean, do you not think that this is wrong? Do you not think that this is indicative of a state that privileges one group of people over another?
It's not happening. So you have just admitted to us that Israel is not genociding the Arab population that it has control over. Thank you so much. I want to ask you one question.
No, they are. They are. They are. And I've already went over this. I can't. Sorry.
Yeah, they're forcibly making them breed more. Okay. So in 2018,
in Gaza,
the Hamas spokesperson.
Israel. Can I answer that question, Jake? Can I answer that question?
I didn't ask you a question.
or that statement.
well,
Can I respond to that?
briefly respond, but then Ridvan is able to move it on.
Right, because Ridvan seems to be making a serious problem here, which is that he says that in the land that Israel controls, they treat Arabs equally. Well, we've already shown that to not be true in any sense, and yet he's still wrong, because in the land that Israel controls in the West Bank, Palestinians don't have a right to vote, despite Israel controlling. I mean, in Area C, there are hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that don't have the right to vote, despite Israel having full control over the land. The settlers who live right next to them, who terrorize them with guns and weapons, do have a right to vote. I submit to you apartheid. In Gaza, which Israel has maritime control, sea control, and clearly has the ability to engage in, as was mentioned in the Clean Break memo,
Is this your brief answer?
whenever they want to. Whenever they want to. And so,
is this your
yes,
brief answer?
when Israel controls land of the Palestinians or land of Arabs, yes, they ethnically cleanse them, and they, in this case, genocide them.
So we are supposed to just ignore how Israel actually treats the Arab population inside Israel. Got it. So in 2018, the Arab spokesperson of Hamas in Gaza, Fatih al-Hamad, gave a speech that was actually, by the way, during the so-called peaceful March of Return. He made a promise to the so-called Palestinians about the future, about 4 months in the future. Do you know what he promised them?
Go ahead.
He promised them, number one, that within 4 years we will get close or accomplish the eradication of the cancer of Jews from the land of Palestine. And promise number two is that we will establish the foundation of the caliphate in Jerusalem. This is the spokesperson designated by Hamas. Fatih al-Hamad is not some random guy. How do you think this works together with your absurd idea that Hamas does not aim for the destruction of Jews and that they are totally willing to work for a two-state solution?
Well, wait a second. I have actually admitted that Hamas is not like I don't think anybody says that Hamas is a perfect organization. Hamas has a problematic ideologies, and it's funny, you're laughing, but I'm actually I'm conceding something.
Not a perfect organization.
No, not by any stretch. So I don't.
So
again, I don't really know why you're laughing.
Israel is apartheid because of land discrimination, but Hamas is not perfect because they want to eradicate the Jews. Okay, all right.
Well, you have failed to recognize that Israel fostered the growth of Hamas as a counterweight, and also this is something you said earlier, that they just wanted Hamas to be a humanitarian organization, despite it being an outgrowth of the Muslim Brotherhood. Doesn't really make sense for Israel to think that. But let's just say that Israel is that naive. The general who is in charge of funding Hamas disagrees with you. So you want to talk about authority? The general in the Israeli army said no, it was designed to produce a counterweight to the Palestinian Liberation Organization.
When was that?
You're wrong. This is in the 80s.
When was that?
In the 80s, when they were
exactly. Was Hamas a militant terrorist organization?
This is before Hamas became official. Really started. Yes, exactly.
So at that point, Hamas was not a genocidal terrorist organization. Hamas had not even formed properly into Hamas. It was merely an extension of the Muslim Brotherhood, posing as a humanitarian organization that wants to distribute charities. And yes, I will totally concede here that Israel was at that point stupid in dealing with this problem because they didn't understand, and they still don't fully understand, Islamist movements. However, how in the world does this in any way help your point?
Well, I want to point out the contradiction here, or the inconsistency, where whenever it's a single Hamas spokesperson or a single Palestinian who says something about Jewish people, that's encompassing of the ideology of all Palestinians. Whereas when the general says that they were funding a Islamist, you finally leave out that point. They might not have been militant yet, but they were an Islamist organization.
I clearly said
in order to provide a counterweight. It's kind of unbelievable what they did. They wanted to subvert the Palestinian population so that they couldn't actually achieve their national identity, so that they could provide, as I've said numerous times, a counterweight to the Palestinian liberation.
This is actually a complete misrepresentation. What Israel actually did was to there was a humanitarian organization which was the extension of the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza, which at that point merely posed as an organization or as a movement that collects and distributes charities. Israel thought these guys want to work toward peace and toward religiosity. We like religiosity, so we will just help these guys. In 1988, or 1987 and 1988, this movement officially turned into a genocidal terrorist organization, and also wrote their charter in which they made it very, very explicit that their aim is to eradicate the Jews, after which point Israel stopped any relations with them and began fighting them. That's what happened.
Well, you're again, I don't know how, I guess we can move on from this point after, if you want to respond to this last point. I don't think we're getting anywhere. You're directly contradicting what the general said. You're directly contradicting it, that it was designed to produce a counterweight. It wasn't designed because they wanted humanitarian aid in Gaza, not at all, or because they wanted education, or because they wanted to build mosques in Gaza. It was because they wanted to provide a counterweight. They wanted this group to essentially deter Western support, because they knew.
Right? Are you implying that it was? Are you implying that it was? Are you implying that Israel is the one that that designed Hamas that way?
No, I wouldn't say that Israel designed Hamas. I think they saw an opportunity.
So would you then think that Israel made a mistake here in characterizing Hamas before it was turned into a terrorist organization?
Well, I don't know if you can describe it as a mistake or strategic, but either way, they were the ones who supported Hamas because they knew that it would deter Western support and not divide the Palestinian people. And
do you have any evidence that Israel knew that this would turn into a violent terrorist genocidal organization?
Well, you can't really produce evidence that somebody knows something.
Exactly.
Not,
so
even if they say, Ridvan, it's a little bit unfair, because even if they say that we know that they're going to turn into a genocidal organization or whatever, I mean, you can't really prove that they have this specific knowledge. If you can maybe say that they thought or that they predicted that it would turn into this. And again, I have no idea if they knew or predicted this, but we do know, and what has been proven by the general and the IDF is that they knew that it would deter Western support and divide the Palestinian people, and they knew, Ridvan, that it was an Islamist organization.
So you can't produce evidence. Okay, fantastic. So here's my question to you. We have talked forever about how Israel is conducting this war at this moment. I want to ask you to move away from the discussion about the background. Sure. Hamas has been violent forever. The other organizations have been violent forever. Hamas never came to an agreement in 2005, 2006, 2007. They have been violent this entire time, promising to eradicate Israel and the Jews, which is why Israel has been having this stance against Israel so far. On October 7, 2023, Hamas attacked Israel, and during this attack, nearly 1,200 people were massacred, most of them civilians, including during a music festival where nearly 400 people were killed, civilians. Do you agree with this assessment?
What, that people were killed during October 7th?
That this is what Hamas did, killing civilians mostly, and killing innocent civilians and so on.
Yeah, they killed civilians on October 7th.
Okay, fantastic. So you acknowledge that. Do you think it was wrong to kill civilians on October 7th?
Well, I always think it's wrong to kill civilians, Ridvan, but I also think it's wrong to keep people under an apartheid system. Now, if you believe that this is wrong, then when there is a contradiction, when Israel shows no real signs of trying to find peace or trying to give the Palestinians a state or trying to give Palestinians equal rights, well, then violent resistance is in a way inevitable. And I know that you're going to make the point, and again, like it's true that civilians really shouldn't die. Like, we don't want civilians to die. We also don't want the circumstances before October 7th to exist.
So I just want to ask you briefly a clarifying question.
Sure.
Do you agree that it was wrong of Hamas to attack and kill civilians on October 7th?
I think it was wrong to. I think it's always wrong to kill civilians, Ridvan. But
Good,
I also don't
fantastic.
see. I also don't see how anything else, like how it wasn't inevitable. You know, I don't see how.
So it was wrong. So what Hamas did on October 7th was wrong.
I don't see how when you have an apartheid state, that that violent resistance is inevitable.
Why does it always have to be getting to yes, this, but that? Why can't you just answer the question properly and just leave
I
it
did
at
answer
that?
the question.
Okay, so
I
so
did
you
answer
agree
the
that
question.
you agree that October 7 was wrong. Okay, good, fantastic. After October 7, Israel has been fighting. What? Do you disagree with that? I see
Well,
you
I
shaking your head.
disagree with I don't agree with some of the things that Hamas did, but I also don't see it as an issue where you can just say, well, Palestinians should just roll over and accept like a subjugation from Israel. I don't see how you can ever like reconcile that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay. Do you agree that had Hamas not pursued terrorism and a clear rejection of Israel, but had indeed maintained a constantly and consistent pattern of peace and mutual recognition, and appealed to the international community to establish autonomy and freedom and mutual peaceful interactions, do you think things would have gone differently?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, things would have gone differently, but the overarching theme would be the same, which is that Palestinians would not have rights, and Israel would claim the land as their own. I mean, and if you want to say, I mean,
Despite the fact that
if
they
the Nakba
clearly
never
made the
happened,
first step.
if the Nakba never happened, if there's never the absentee property laws, if there's never all these discriminatory laws, if apartheid never happened, then everything would be different. But if Hamas was never violent, well, you kind of are missing a big chunk of the history here, which is that Hamas published their charter in 1988.
Yeah.
The Nakba was years before that, decades before that. And so it's clear that in order to form an Israeli state, in order to form a Jewish state, you have to do. I mean, and Israel knew this.
What happened? Very briefly, what happened during the Nakba?
Okay, hundreds of
Very
thousands of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced out of their homes. Villages were razed, destroyed. Deir Yassin, hundreds of Palestinians were killed en masse, and many had to leave. And then afterwards, I'll just finish this up really quickly. The homes which Palestinians had permits to were taken by the state of Israel.
Okay, so first off, they wouldn't identify as Palestinians at that point. They would just simply identify as Arabs. But I'll just leave it at that. What happened before the so-called Nakba, and why did it happen? Did Israel just cause this to happen? Why did this come into existence?
Well, the Nakba would have had to. I mean, a massive ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, Arabs. Of the group of people living in Palestine before 1948. It would have been inevitable. It would have been impossible for it to have not happened.
You didn't answer the question. How did this unfold? Who started this? This displacement.
Who started it? Who started the displacement? It was Zionists in the late 1800s and early 1900s who bought land and evicted Palestinian tenants.
What happened before the so-called Nakba? What triggered the Nakba?
I already told you. It was Zionism itself when Zionists went to the land of Palestine and evicted tenants. Like I don't see what you're not understanding about this.
This is so weird. So until 1948, the Zionists just waited, and then in 1948 they suddenly decided to just forcibly evict and destroy and kick out the so-called Palestinians. Is that what you think happened?
I think that obviously there was a 50-year history before that included revolts, that included Zionist terrorism,
was there a
civil war? That
was there a
included
war?
a civil war leading up to 1948. That also included revolts in which all Palestinian leaders were expelled. So I mean,
precisely.
I
what
think what
exactly?
you're trying to do is to try and
what exactly preceded the
blame.
Nakba?
I've just told you. Eviction of Palestinian tenants, revolts, Zionist terrorism against Britain. I mean, you want to pretend.
So you think Israel made the first step in this entire conflict?
You want to pretend that everything is the fault of the Palestinians. It's almost comical when it was Zionists in Europe and Russia that began this movement of colonizing Palestine. I mean, it's almost comical that you think that it's just single thing is the Palestinians' fault, and that Israel should just be able to go and form a state on other people's land if they
As
want
said,
to.
you
It's
either
absurd.
don't know the
It's absurd.
history, or you don't want to know the history. So, well, there was a war going on in 1948. Who started this war?
Which one, the Civil War or the Arab-Israeli War?
The Arab-Israeli War.
The Egyptians, the Syrians, the Iraqis, etc.
Together with the local Palestinian Arabs. Exactly. So the Arab side started the war.
No, not really. Not really. I kind of have to push back with you on that, because I mean, do you know how many Palestinian leaders there were in Palestine in 1948?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The Palestinian entities joined the conflict.
If this was disparate, like Palestinians with no leadership or no organization, that's a little different. If they're fighting against highly organized Jewish militias,
whatever.
If they're like that, you have to. So
the Arab side started the war. The Arab side started the war.
Yeah, of course.
This war came after.
That.
This war came during the Civil War, which was started in 1947. Which side started the Civil War?
Most historians would agree that it was the Palestinians that started the Civil War.
Exactly. So it was the Arabs who started the Civil War. So in 1947, before the partition and before the Zionists established their state and had control over the entire land, the Arab side started a civil war, which was led by massacres and brutal violence. And in 1948, the Arab side started an extermination war against Israel. So at what point do you think the Zionists created the
You're conveniently leaving out the terrorism of the Leahy or Stern Gang, of the Ergun, of the Haganah. You're conveniently leaving out that, I mean, if we want to get into it, the future prime minister of Israel, Yitzhak Shamir, was a leader of the Leahy, which said in its newsletter that no Jewish precept prevents any of us from doing terrorism. You're leaving out that Zionists would settle the land and evict and force out Arab tenants. You leave out so much in your analysis.
Before 1947, there was no taking control and eviction of populations. The Lehi and Ergun and the Haganah were all organizations. The Haganah came first and was a very ethical organization. The Haganah came first, and the Haganah was initially founded as a merely defensive force by the Jewish population, due to the repeated attacks from the Arab side, at which point they decided, okay, we have to defend ourselves. The later organizations, the more controversial ones, Lehi only had up to 200 members, were founded,
including the future prime minister of Israel,
because they decided, we keep being attacked, we can't just sit here and defend, we have to retaliate and also at some point initiate attacks. Yes, they did. However, all of this came as a result of Arab aggressions.
You acknowledge that it wasn't all Arab aggression, that the Zionists had organizations that were terrorist organizations that they used to slaughter and massacre Palestinians. And you acknowledge, unless you want to refute every historian ever on this issue, that Zionists bought land and then they evicted Arab tenants.
Well, if you buy land, if you officially buy land, it is your right to do with the land whatever you want to do. If there are tenants in the place that you buy, then of course you can tell them, hey, this land belongs to me. I want to do something else with this. You have to leave now. Totally fine.
Right. Yeah, and I actually agree with you on that. If you buy land, it's perfectly fair for you to do whatever you want with that land. What I think is problematic is that you buy land. You're a Zionist, you buy land and you evict Arab tenants so that you can import Jewish people from other parts of the world so that you can start a Jewish state. And then with your intention of creating a Jewish state, you expect there to be no retribution on any other side. It's almost comical how you think that
retribution to what?
Retribution to the establishment of a state or the future establishment of a state. I mean, I don't think maybe you don't know this or maybe you don't realize this, but it's not like Arabs were completely it's not like they didn't know that Israel was the future of the Zionists. It's not like they didn't know that Zionists wanted to create a state. I mean, this is almost it's absurd.
I just have one question to you. Do you know about the massacre of 1929 that happened in the land?
Yeah.
What happened? Can you tell me?
There was a riot. I mean, I don't really like being tested on historical facts. I'm not. I'm not here to
No
educate
problem.
you.
No
But
problem. No
about
problem.
50,
No problem. It's fine.
about 50 Jewish people were killed
Yeah, it was the first
in in Hebron, I believe.
It was the first large-scale massacre in the region. It was started by the Arab side, which in 1929, in Hebron primarily, but also in other regions, started riots based on rumors that the Zionists want to take control over the Western Wall, and started mass killing and kicking people out. Many of the population, the Jews of Hebron, had to be kicked out. Some were brought back later. Later on, they were kicked out once again. So this was the first large-scale massacre.
Wait, yeah,
It was
I actually,
started
I don't dispute that.
Okay, it was started by the Arab side. Here's the thing. We keep going to the causes of the violent confrontations every single time. We keep hearing the very same thing, which is that the Arab side was the aggressor. However, we have to excuse that because the Israeli side...
We're
I
going to
don't
move it
acknowledge
on now,
that.
fellas.
I
I
don't
think that was a very productive half an hour there. I'm actually learning a lot today myself, which is really, really interesting. So the prompt of the debate is Israel is not the bad guy, and I think that actually we've stayed on topic pretty much the whole time. I just want to sort of give a few standards that have sort of borne themselves out during this debate. And for the last bit, it's just going to be an open back and forth, and you guys have the chance to present from your side as to why your side is correct in terms of the standards. So which side historically is more guilty of terror? Which side is historically more responsible for the current conflict? Which side has a genocidal intent? And which side is more responsible for the events of and after October the 7th? So I think those are some of the standards that have come up in the debate today. So you guys have about 20 minutes. We're going to see who nobody has the floor now. It's just a back and forth. Just wanted to let you guys know that any super chats that you guys leave, we are going to read out after this, and the gentleman will have a chance to respond to them. About $10 and up, we'll read them out. Weak on the super chat so far, guys. So get them up so we can get some good questions in there. And then after that, and then we have demonetized this so that there's no ads during the video. So get some super chats in, guys. Show some love for the stream. And also, we're going to be doing a poll at the end. It's going to be the same poll as we did at the start. Israel is not the bad guy. Agree, disagree, or undecided. And we're going to see who has changed the most minds today. So with that, you guys have the floor. And with those standards in mind, let's see what we come up with.
Yeah, can we just, I don't know, Aiden, we talked a lot. I'm not sure if we need 20 or 30 more minutes to talk about this, to be honest, instead of jumping to the closing statements. But I don't know. What do you think?
We can do whatever. I'm happy to talk more about the genocide that's happening right now.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, we can
move on to closing statements.
Sure.
I mean, it doesn't.
We can talk.
Let's try and keep it to 10 minutes or so, and then we'll do a few minutes of closing statements, and then we'll read some super chats.
Okay. Aiden, I wanted to ask you, what do you think Israel should do as a result of this? So during the current war, how do you think they should conduct this war?
Well, to be honest, it is a difficult question. I'm not going to deny that, because I don't think that the way that Israel conducted itself before the war was appropriate either. However, I don't think it's reasonable to say that Israel couldn't respond. I think that's kind of it's just kind of absurd to say that they wouldn't. Whether they should, though, is a completely different question, because it completely ignores the context of what we have been discussing this entire debate, which is their ethnic cleansing of Palestine, their apartheid in Palestine, their stripping of rights, their stripping of Palestinians' right to vote. And it does ignore a lot. Now, look, I think that Israel was always going to respond. They were always going to respond with a violent massacre, a violent, just complete destruction of Gaza. But that doesn't mean that they should. And I think that's actually a point that really gets lost here a lot, which is that, people will say, well, what do you expect? Do you expect Israel not to respond? It's like, no, I always expected Israel to respond, but but that doesn't mean that they should. That doesn't mean that they should have. That doesn't mean that they should have committed the massive atrocities that they've committed on the scale. They shouldn't. To answer your question specifically, I'm sorry for going on so long, Ridvan. To answer your question specifically, they should not be targeting civilians. They should not be killing children. They should not be sodomizing Palestinian hostages in jail. There's a number of
Did-
things that they're doing which is just completely.
Do we have evidence for that? Do we have
against
evidence that they're
international-
sodomizing
against
children?
international law. Yeah, actually, if you go onto you can go onto YouTube and you can look up a meeting of the Israeli statespeople debating whether or not they should be allowed to do whatever they want, quote unquote, to the Nukba, and they're actually debating whether or not they should be able to sodomize Palestinians. So
Here's the thing:
there's
there's actually no instance or evidence of them actually sodomizing anybody. There's only been so far until this day. There have been reports, of course, hearsay, and so on. And there has been there was one video which is circulated online. You can even look it up. In fact, do it.
Yeah, and
do
there's
it.
yes,
do it.
yes.
Do it and go look it up. Look up the video of supposedly IDF reservists sodomizing a prisoner. What actually happens on the footage, as you can see, is that the IDF reservists pick up one person who, according to the reports, was a Hamas officer or Hamas police officer or something like that. They take him behind a space where they cover them up with shields. A dog is there violently barking at the guy, and you can see one person behind that person apparently doing something with his hands. And what apparently happened there is that allegedly they inserted or removed something out of his bottom, and allegedly they also engaged in unnecessary torture while doing that or something like that. So that's what is meant.
I find this astonishing that you're defending this, especially when, I mean, we have the video. I've seen the video. Apparently it seems like you've seen the video too. And we also have a debate that's public of Israeli statespeople debating whether or not it's okay to do whatever they want to the
It's actually
that's what they say.
It's actually not
And so
about whatever they want to do.
It's actually unbelievable that you would defend like sodomy. I mean, this is
No,
this is,
no,
this is
I don't. I
incredible.
don't. And the debate is also not about whatever they about doing whatever they want to do. The debate is about whether such actions, if necessary, may be applied or not. And as I said, from the video that we have seen, there was something going on. It is entirely possible. There are multiple explanations. One of those explanations came out, which was that the guy hid something in his behind, which is why this happened. The other is that whoever was in charge actually did violently mistreat this guy. No matter what happened there, whether it was wrong, whether it was right, whether it was necessary or not, the people who engaged in it were brought to were detained in order to then be questioned about this. And the discussion was never about, oh, can we freely rape these people or not? The question was about whether such actions are justifiable or not. And I would say, if you have a population, or if you have certain criminals who may engage in hiding certain things inside of them, it is entirely expectable that you may engage in such actions, although you shouldn't abuse it, of course.
Okay, I mean, I don't even think we need to further that point. We have Ridvan clearly defending the rape and sodomization of Palestinian hostages.
That's neither rape nor sodomization. That's very weird. If you hide something up your butt, and
when you insert a metal object into the behind of a person, is that not sodomy?
No, we didn't establish that at all. If a guy hides something behind,
hiding a metal rod, and maybe this is just me not being a doctor, a medical doctor who knows exactly what sodomy is, but I honestly think that if you hide a metal rod in someone's behind, then that should count as sodomy. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you think that that's just totally acceptable.
The assertion here is that this guy may have hidden a metal object which he broke off inside his anus, and that as a result of this, the action we have seen took place, which is entirely possible.
I feel like I'm. Oh, you're saying that the prisoner put the object in his behind.
Possibly.
Okay,
Yeah.
well then explain to me why they were debating why this was acceptable, because you still haven't really fleshed that out. You're saying that this debate had nothing to do with this act of sodomy. I mean, it's like, maybe you can explain that to me.
So we have an instance, this is very funny, by the way. When we talk about rapes or sodomy happening, this is what we're talking about. So there was a debate about what exactly happened. One of those topics, one of those explanations is that a member belonging to a terrorist organization who is in detention broke something off and hid it in his behind. And during the inspection of this or the removal of this, they allegedly mistreated this guy. And then there has been an entire discussion about whether that is okay or not. It's ridiculous that this is what we're talking about, but whatever. This is just
incredible.
This is absolute. Oh, you think they shouldn't be doing anything?
I don't think that they should be sodomizing Palestinians.
Yeah,
I don't think
fantastic.
that they should be.
Fantastic. I also don't think that people should be thrown off buildings, but nobody has established that anyway, so I'm not sure why we're talking about it.
I don't think they should shoot. I don't think they should shoot children, target hospitals, target residential buildings.
They don't
should bomb refugee camps. I don't think they should bomb refugee camps. I don't think they should starve entire populations. But you seem to think that's entirely okay. Like it's almost
does Hamas have
to defend Israel?
Do you acknowledge that Hamas actually fights from within civilian buildings and civilian facilities, and they don't have military organizations?
You constantly want to shift the blame to Hamas, and yet I have given you perfectly crystal clear examples of Israel targeting refugee camps where there's no militants, there's no nothing, residential areas where there's no militants, no weapons, no nothing, destroying, raiding hospitals, and then pretending that doctors are terrorists. I mean, and then you have examples of for example, in the Netzarim corridor.
This is a very funny thing. We talk about
anybody who crosses the line is a terrorist.
You keep evading the topic of Hamas simply using civilian facilities in order to fight, but then you want to move on from that without talking about it and make it look like Israel is just searching out civilian facilities. So I'm still curious about the question. I'm still curious about the question. Does Hamas actually have civilian facilities?
You don't answer my questions. Why am I expected to answer yours? I mean, if you want to give me...
Okay, well, fine. How about this? Let's do it your way. I will answer your question. Hamas does not have any military facilities inside Gaza. It is very well known, even by the humanitarian organizations, even by the United Nations that nowadays accuses Israel of all kinds of things, who have pointed it out many times in the past. It is very well known that Hamas does not have military facilities. Hamas does not have designated military zones, and Hamas fighters very frequently, in fact, most often when they are fighting, wear civilian clothes, which they specifically do in order to hide themselves better among the civilian population. So if Israel is now a military force fighting against this group, they are faced with a terrorist organization that comes out of every rat hole or wormhole and that has no designated facilities and no designated uniform. And you think it's a bad thing that Israel shoots against these guys and kills both Hamas and civilians?
I think it's a bad thing when Israel shoots children, which you still haven't come up with a refutation.
That's a very, very nice deflection.
I think it's a bad thing when Israel targets civilian areas, or when they starve an entire population, or when they turn off.
What civilian areas, Aidan? What civilian areas are they military areas?
I've given you multiple examples.
I get it. Are there military areas?
You don't respond to the actual point. Now, if you want me to respond to the Hamas,
it seems that you're actually scared. You're scared of the question here. This is what it looks like, because you keep running from this question. No, I'm asking you a very specific question, which you keep running from. Aidan, where are there military facilities inside Gaza?
You constantly call. You will call, and Israel and the IDF does this as well. You'll call civilians terrorists if they cross certain lines. If they go into certain areas, you'll call civilians terrorists if they seem like they're posing a threat. You'll call civilians terrorists if you don't have anything else to call them. You can call Aidan. That everyone is dressing in civilian clothes. You can't answer the very basic question: why does Israel target civilian zones that we know are civilian zones? You can't answer that question.
Zones, can you give me an example of which zones Israel should be targeting during this entire war?
Well, if you want me to answer that question directly, I think that they should only be targeting Hamas militants, even if they're
and where are Hamas militants?
We know that they don't.
Where are Hamas militants?
We know
Which
that they
zones are
don't.
they in?
We know that Israel does not target Hamas militants. This is not
Okay,
me defending
where
Hamas
are
and their strategy of
the
war.
Hamas
This is
militants?
me specifically talking about Israel and why Israel is the bad guy. There's nothing to do with it in this particular case. There's nothing to do with Hamas. There's nothing to do with Hamas and how they engage in war. It has everything to do with Israel because
You see how
even
ridiculous
when
this
they
looks, right?
know even when Israel knows that it's not Hamas, I don't think you can't really see this point. Even when Israel knows it's not Hamas, they still target civilian infrastructure.
All right, fellas, going in circles a little bit here now. So I do appreciate the spirited back and forth, though, and appreciate both of your time today, guys. And Aiden, you're taking on someone who's a very, very experienced debater today, and Ridvan, who's obviously done many of these debates. So I appreciate both of your time today. But we're going to get into some closing statements now. Aiden, you're gonna start off, and we'll put out maybe 2 minutes or so. But if you want to go a little bit over, you can. And guys, we've just put the poll in the chat. Same poll as the start. Israel is the bad guy. Agree, disagree, or undecided. And we're going to see, compared to the start, who has managed to change the most minds today. So, Aiden, with that, I'll give you the floor. You've got a few minutes, and make your closing statement.
Well, throughout this debate, first of all, thank you, Jake. Thank you, Ridvan, for participating in this debate. Throughout this debate, Ridvan has constantly tried to pin the blame on Hamas and Islamic ideology. In reality, the beginning of the conflict started when Zionists colonized and settled in Palestine. That is the beginning, and that is what led to all of the revolts and the terrorism from Zionists and the terrorism from PLO, et cetera, et cetera. It all started when Israel tried to settle the land and with the intention of creating a state, which everyone knew would result in forcing the indigenous population out. Now we move on to October 7th and what's happened since then. There is really no way that anybody can justify the killing of civilians unless it seems like that there's no path to actual freedom. Now, I do not sponsor Hamas. I do not approve of their ideology. Ridvan seems to have ignored that, but nothing can justify the way that Israel has treated the Palestinians before October 7th, and nothing can justify the genocide that's come since then.
And Ridvan, the closing statements.
Yes. So first of once again, thank you, Jake, and thanks, Aiden, for this debate. I think it's pretty obvious that when you want to make certain allegations and certain assertions about Israel, such as that they are supposedly targeting civilians, whenever this is put to a test, there are certain questions that the other side just cannot answer, such as if Israel wants to actively fight Hamas without civilian casualties, where exactly should they fire? What zones should they target? The question is it cannot be answered because it's very simple. Hamas doesn't have military facilities. Hamas deliberately builds their military structure under the civilian population in tunnels. In fact, Hamas was confronted about this many times in the past, even after October 7. On TV, they were asked, why do you spend all of the humanitarian aid to build tunnels under the civilian population instead of providing shelters for your civilians? Hamas's response to that is, we care about fighting and defending our soldiers. The protection of our civilian population is not our responsibility. This is a Hamas response. I'm not even joking. Hamas has repeatedly, through Ismail Haniyeh and the other guy with the big ears, who are both dead, gladly, have repeatedly bragged about and said that it is in their best interest to have as many civilian deaths as possible. They said that it is absolutely necessary to ignite the revolution through the blood of the children, the women, and the elderly. These are word for word the words of Ismail Haniyeh. They do hide among civilians, they fire from among civilians, they execute their own people, they use human shields, and whenever it happens, which they plan for, they then start playing the victim. Unfortunately, Aiden here today first off made excuses for Hamas and never even condemned them, because it is apparently very, very difficult to condemn a terrorist organization which is probably on par with the Nazis of Nazi Germany, which is not very surprising considering that their foremost leaders were also friends of the Nazis.
Okay, gentlemen, we're going to read out some of the super chats. Get your votes in now, guys. Last chance to get a super chat in as well. Get your votes in, and then after these super chats, we will reveal the results of the poll. So Mansfield for $20 says GG, which whatever that means. GG to you too. Todd McGann for $10 says, how is Israel committing a genocide when the population of Gaza has increased since Israel started this genocide? Why is Israel the only country that is harshly criticized for defending themselves? And I believe that's for you, Aiden.
Yeah, I believe that what the person is referring to is a CIA estimate that the population of Gaza has increased by 2%. I mean, that's the CIA, which is kind of laughable. And then it's also an estimate. So there's been no census data performed in Gaza since October 7th. So there's no way of actually proving what the exact population of Gaza is. Second part, why is Israel the only country that is harshly criticized for defending themselves? Well, if the creation of a state resulted in the mass ethnic cleansing of hundreds of thousands of civilians, and then whenever they tried to resist this ethnic cleansing or resist occupation, they were then I think that any other country would also be criticized for massacring populations and committing genocides and targeting children. And targeting civilian population centers. So I don't think Israel is alone in getting criticized.
The number of people born in Gaza is estimated to be higher than the number of people who died as a result of the currently ongoing war, including terrorists.
Again, an estimate. I'm
answering, Aiden. Also, Aiden is also one of those people, like many others, who have characterized the past, including after 48 and 67, as oppression and genocide, which is very, very funny, considering that the population of Gaza has consistently boomed and risen. Just over the last 3 decades, it's multiplied by 3-fold. So it's a very, very interesting way of committing a genocide. And Israel's existence has resulted in people being displaced only for the very sole reason that those people want to destroy Israel. That's it.
Okay, and the next one for $5, Mr. Watts says, and Ridvan, I'm just going to leave this one to you because I know there's a wrong assumption there. But Ridvan, how do you, as a Christian, I assume, reconcile the teachings in the Talmud that insult the Lord and Mary?
I'm not a Christian. Also, the Talmud, not sure what the Talmud has to do with this discussion, but the Talmud has certain references to different figures that some associate with Jesus, others don't. Internally, rabbis associate some with them, others don't. The details of it are very, very inconsistent, even with everything known about Jesus and so on, but completely unrelated to this discussion. Not sure why this has to do with this.
Okay. John Dinan for $20 says, question for Aiden. If your worldview about Israel is correct and they are a fascist state committing genocide, what is the justification for why that is wrong? If the answer is it causes harm, why is harm evil?
That's actually that's actually a good question. The answer really would be because my worldview says that it's wrong. And if you question that, then we'd have to get into presuppositionalism. My worldview is one that I want everyone to have international human rights, guaranteed to equal treatment, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, all this sort of stuff. And so that just directly contravenes it. You could also say that if you really want to get into precept, there's really no justification. You could say that anything is right or anything is wrong if you change your worldview to account for anything, really. I don't know, Ridvan, you might have a good answer to this question too.
They've met.
Sorry.
Even if you're
or not, but if you're an atheist, that might be a tough question to answer.
Yeah. Not necessarily. I mean, it's just coming down to human flourishing. If they indeed did something that was unnecessarily causing harm to human flourishing, I would oppose that. But I don't think that Israel is doing anything like that at all. Even if Israel's retaliations and responses and defenses cause suffering to a side that popularly engages in wanting to genocide the other side, I can't really care about that.
Okay, cool. Next question is from I'm Not Your Buddy Guy. The Canadian $20 with probably with Justin Trudeau inflation, it's probably like 30 cents, but thank you anyway. No, you should be able to criticize Israel just like any other nation. They've made bad decisions in the past. However, there is genuine Jewish derangement that exists, and I truly believe Islam is incompatible with the West. Ridvan, I'm going to kick that one to you.
Yeah, of course, you should be able to criticize Israel, just like other nations. I've also in the past criticized Israel. I've also criticized Netanyahu's government. I think that they have done lots of wrong things. And yes, people are extremely anti-Semitic today. It's very, very popular, very, very fantastic. Just the fact that we're having this debate today also has to do with the fact that Jews are part of this conflict and that the global Muslim population keeps having an obsession with Jews for reasons explained at the very beginning of this debate. If this wasn't a war between Jews and Muslims, we wouldn't even be talking about this right now, because there are many other conflicts in the world that we didn't spend no second talking about, such as the genocide going on in Sudan.
All right. And Aiden, just in terms, do you think that there is a Jewish derangement around this topic? And how about Islam being incompatible with the West?
With the Jewish derangement part, I mean, there is clear anti-Semitism in large parts of the world, in America and Europe and the rest of the world. I don't think there's any reason to deny that. You have people like, I mean, this is just an anecdote, but you have people like Myron Gaines calling Jewish people the K word on Twitter. It's just like, it's just so ridiculous. And I don't think there's any reason to deny that there's anti-Semitism. Jewish derangement, though, especially among the left and the criticism of Israel, I don't think exists. I think that throughout this debate, it's made very clear that Israel is a state that privileges Jewish people over non-Jewish people, that it is occupying other places, that it is committing, even if you don't believe it's a genocide, it's committing horrific war crimes, including starvation, targeting of children, etc. Islam being incompatible with the West, that kind of actually, it contradicts one of the values of the West, which is freedom of religion. So it's kind of it's a paradoxical statement.
Do you think that perhaps Islam itself contradicts that very principle?
Yeah, I think most religions do. So,
right. And then the next one for Mansfield for $20 says, first time I've been able to catch a live, love the debates. Thank you very much, Mansfield. I do appreciate that. Devin the Dude for $10 says, AP, after hearing this debate, I choose the cow.
It's a meme.
Okay. ALC for $5 says, great job, AP. Question for Aiden. Are you paid off by the Saudis? PS, go. That's not very nice, guys. I didn't read that. I shouldn't have brought that up.
That's very rude, ALC.
Very rude.
To answer the question, no. I wish I got money from the Saudis.
And the next question is from Ethan Matthew for $7. It says, free the hostages now, bring them home. So Hamas knows exactly how many dead there are, but not population growth numbers. Any of you guys want to comment on that?
No. Bring them home. Free the hostages, bring them home.
Just quickly, Hamas doesn't know exactly how many are dead. That's just not true.
Okay.
But just to point out, to highlight one thing, which is Hamas is still holding hostages. They took mostly civilian hostages on October 7. Many of those people have been living under horrific circumstances. Many of them are dead, and still Hamas holds on to their bodies. Hamas and other Palestinian organizations, and even civilians, by the way. I hope they can all be released soon. Bring them home.
And Jonathan Diner for $5 says, thank you both, Aiden and AP, for answering. Yeah, I do agree. You guys are both really good sports during this debate, and I really, really appreciate that. Jumping Snail for SGD. What's SGD? $5 says, I think it's funny that actual genocide, Saudi v Yemen, are ignored because it's a Muslim versus Muslim war. Any of you guys want to comment on that?
I haven't ignored it. I actually am a big hater of Saudi Arabia. I'm not a Saudi Arabia supporter at all. I criticize them all the time, actually.
Yeah, I pointed this out earlier. There are lots of really, really bad things going on in the world. The funny thing is, over the last 20 years, many wars have been fought in the Middle East. The Israel-Hamas war is not even is not even remotely as horrific in death counts and so on, compared to the Syrian civil war, for example. But everybody has to talk about Israel because of Jews.
All right. And then Mansfield for $20. Last one here. Second last one says, go to prison in the US. It's mandatory. Mandatory butt searches for everyone. Hop, incest. I don't know what that means, but yeah, I think he's talking about in terms of the cavity search argument as opposed to the rape argument there. And we won't hark on that one too long because it did get a bit TOS for a second. But Mansfield for $20. Thank you for your patronage today, Mansfield. I appreciate that. Says, how is this different? How is that different? My bad. Okay, cool. So that's in regards to the last one. The mandatory butt searches in the prison as opposed to, yeah. But like, I mean, Aiden, you disagree that is actually what happened there. You believe that it was in fact them being raped?
I've seen the video. I mean, we've already discussed this. I've seen the video and I've seen the debate. And having seen both, I don't even see how it's logical why they would be debating whether to do cavity searches. It just doesn't make sense. The only thing that makes sense is if the video and what we saw, our eyes didn't deceive us, and it actually was sodomy.
There was another super chat from somebody here that I think we went over, but
we've got one more down here that says CPT Big Z for $5 just come in. Says USS Liberty, 9/11, JFK, Bolsheviks, Frankfurt School, Gates of Toledo, the Holodomor, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, 200 years together. I think that one's for you, Ridvan.
That comes from a 50 IQ person here. Don't even bother responding. I mean, why would you even?
I don't fully disagree with that, Ridvan. I don't think that someone is just.
It's some imbecile promoting the most obvious forgery of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion in today's time. It's just, I mean, how can you take this person seriously?
Yeah. I don't really know what that is, if I'm totally honest. So
it's the anti-Jewish forces inside Russia, and at the beginning of 20th century, made up a fake document that supposedly shows the Jewish plans for world domination and all that. It's obviously forgery, and people still buy it.
All right. So, guys, in terms of the polls, at the start, we had Israel is not the bad guy. 64% agreed with the proposition. Undecided was 18%, and then disagree was 17%. And then at the end, Israel is not the bad guy. 80% agree, so 16% shift in favor of Ridvan. And then 13% disagree, so a 3% shift there for Aiden. And then 6% were undecided. So Ridvan was successful in bringing over many of the undecided voters there. So appreciate you both today. Aiden, obviously, you didn't quite get the result today, but, you know, Ridvan's a much, much more experienced debater. So I appreciate your courage in debating this issue that you're clearly very passionate about, and you're always welcome back on the channel. We do plenty of debates here and panels and everything, and Ridvan, same goes for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it, Jake. I think Aiden was a very confident opponent. I don't think that he was very good, but he was very confident and very good at pushing back. So, yeah. But thank you, Jake, and thank you, Aiden.
Thank you very much. Any closing statements for yourself, Aiden? All right. Take care, guys.
Yep. All right. Thanks.
So stick around, chat. We'll have a little bit of a conversation about it, and then we'll wrap things up. Thank you very much for all the super chats, guys. I really appreciate all the patronage today. We'll get this monetized again after that. But I was like, I don't know how I feel about having the ads pop up, because I want people to be able to jump straight into the debate. So very, very. I mean, I learned a lot there, guys. It's not really something that I know too much about, if I'm totally honest. This whole Israel-Palestine thing. I've done a little bit of research about it and just sort of cursory, but yeah, I personally just enjoy watching these debates. But yeah, Ridvan, the Apostate Prophet, very, very experienced debater. Would definitely try and get him back on the channel at some point soon to debate either this topic or something else. And then Aiden as well, young guy. I think like I would have a slight critique there in terms of, I believe that he did have there were a few very strong points that he could have hammered down on, but when he comes and he makes assertions about, for example, genocide, and for example, about the various different bombings and killing of civilians and incidences, you need to sort of have all of these the receipts to back that up. So in the future, he'll probably come a little bit more prepared, especially when debating someone of the caliber of Apostate Prophet. So cool to get him on the channel. I've been watching Apostate Prophet for years. I often watch when they do him and David Wood do their breakdowns. So very, very interesting stuff. Next week, guys, for those of you who are still in the chat, we have got a very exciting debate. We're going to be having debates every single week, hopefully this year, guys. I'm going to be working hard to bring them to you. But now I can announce next week's debate. Drum roll, please. We've got Andrew Wilson coming on to debate somebody who is an LGBTQ pastor in the church. So the prompt or the topic of the debate is going to be something along the lines of, should the church accept LGBTQ people? So it's going to be a really interesting debate. Andrew's opponent, Brandon, is actually writing a book on this at the moment about LGBTQ in the church. So he's not just some sort of random. He's a smart guy. Thanks so much to Apostate Prophet for the $50 super chat. I really appreciate that. Really, really appreciate you coming on the channel as well. So yeah, guys, next week's debate. Brandon, he's a really smart guy. You know, he's writing a book and he's going to bring it to Andrew. I've seen him do a few debates and it's going to be a good one. So really looking forward to that. Diego Rivera says, have you reached out to Dave Smith or Scott Horton to debate FP? What's FP? Do you mean AP? Apostate Prophet? No. To debate FP. You're going to have to tell me what you mean by that. It's probably something super obvious. So yes, going to get some great debates going on. But I should reach out to Scott Horton or Dave Smith. That would be really actually fun to get those guys on. I'm actually reading one of Scott Horton's books at the moment. His book, Enough Already, about the wars in the Middle East. Renee W for $5 says, thanks for hosting and thanks AP for defending Israel. And Apostate Prophet says, thanks guys, was fun. We appreciate that. And yeah, so we'll get Aiden on. I think that I've seen Aiden debate about these things, but I think he's also of the liberal persuasion in other regards as well. I think he briefly touched on his utilitarian worldview there by what I ascertained, saying that he believes that within his own sort of moral paradigm, X is evil. So I've definitely got some people who would like to debate him about that. And we're going to have some panels going on in the future. So very, very open for Aiden to come back on the show at some point. But yeah, guys, that is about it from me today. Have we got any more super chats here? Oh, okay, cool. We've got Diego Rivera for $2 as foreign policy. So Dave Smith and Scott Horton to debate foreign policy. Yeah, I mean, Dave Smith's a really busy guy. He's blown up over the last year or so, but I've been watching Dave Smith for years as well. For years. I'm like a old school supporter or watcher of Dave Smith. So he and Scott Horton would be good ones to get on. And I do tend to sort of share a lot of their worldview about foreign policy. Anyways, guys, get pumped up for next week's debate. Andrew Wilson versus Brandon, the LGBTQ pastor. It's going to be a fascinating one. Two gentlemen who are going to bring the heat. And with that, I will leave you guys. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday, or I believe it's Tuesday in some places like the land down under. And with that, Jake, this is Rattlesnake TV, along with all the guests, keeping you armed and dangerous.